It wasn't supposed to end this way, but it so easily could have. June 11th, 2003 was my dark night of the soul. That's the day that I nearly ended my life. I stand before you a miracle, a blessing that I am still here. Because you see, I'm one of the people who has survived after leaping off of the edge of the Manhattan Bridge and plunging into the East River. And I'm here because there was a legion of caregivers, first responders, and people who were more committed to my life in that moment than I was. And what I want to do in the next few minutes as the final speaker in today's discovery is to share with you what has it been like since that day on the bridge back to life, and share with you what tactical pieces I have put together, which I hope can prevent anybody from going as far down as I went, and to find a way that we can live together more fully. I don't talk a lot about that night and the details of that, but it wasn't my first trip to the rodeo. That tombstone that you saw a few minutes ago could have very easily had February of 1977, when I was a 7th grader. And sitting at the foot of my parents' bed while they were gone with a loaded handgun. Or it could have been January of 1981 when I was a junior in high school and I poured into my body a ton of pills thinking that that would end my life. And when that failed, I ran away from home, terrifying my parents. And I am one of 1.5 million people each year who tries to end their life. And I am delighted that I am here, and yet it's a privilege that I get to be here and share all of this with you, because I am still here. And so with that bonus round, I have found an analogy that I think is really useful to think about in this final conversation about mental health and flourishing. And that's the analogy of a brush fire. Now, a week ago, I was on a plane to Detroit to do a keynote speech, and I got reseated on the plane. So instead of sitting where I was, I moved across the aisle so that I could let a husband and wife sit together and stop passing things over me like sandwiches. And I sat down next to this aerial firefighter, Chris Panos. And so I fact-checked the analogy that I'm about to give you with somebody who actually works in the industry. And what fascinated me was he has a career that I didn't even know existed before that flight. He flies on a plane with drones, and he manages a team of drones that he can see the spark of a fire before they even become a flame. And he can guide, who he quickly tells me, the firefighters who do the real work, he can guide them down on the ground because of his drone technology up in the air. And so I checked with Chris, and I said, I'm going to use this analogy in this talk. And the way I see it is, when there is a brush fire, there are preconditions. There are things that happen that make it possible, and there is a spark. So the preconditions for a brush fire are high winds or hot temperature or dry grass. These are things that in and of themselves will not catch fire. But when they intersect with a spark, which could be a cigarette thrown out of a car, it could be a campfire that doesn't get put out correctly, or fireworks that get shot off. Or what Chris told me was that sometimes there are trucks that have chains that hang off of them, and the chains bouncing on the pavement cause a spark that could, with the preconditions, spark into a fire. And you know what? It's the same thing with our mental health. There are preconditions that set us up for a catastrophic thing in our life. There are preconditions that can cause us to, in the rooms of recovery, we talk about HALT. If you are too angry, too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired, or if you're using recreational drugs or alcohol or doom scrolling or spending time in situations that are not flourishing for you. But when those preconditions come together with a spark, like a fight with a good friend, or a loss of a job that you really cared about, or a financial setback, or the loss of someone you love, we can again have a catastrophic strike in our mental health. And after the fire, there then is that charred ground. The advertisement for this event, we use the phrase, no mud, no lotus. Out of that mud and out of that charred ground, life can reemerge. Life can come back, but it takes some work, and it takes some effort, and it takes some real intentional thought to get away from the charred ground and back into a life that makes a difference. So the way I see it, there are the things that we can add to our life, and there are the things that we can take away from our life. It's what you can water the grass and what you can clear the brush. So in terms of watering the grass, the things that you can add to your life. I started today in meditation and writing a gratitude list and journaling. Today, when everything was going well in the room, I took a walk for a half hour and I got outside and I had breath. We gathered as a group of speakers and we took moments of breath just to presence ourselves. Adding those things keeps your grass dry. And there's things you can take away. There are toxic people and toxic situations. In the first several years of recovery, I didn't go home for Christmas. I love my family and I love Christmas. But that was a toxic place for me to be when my recovery was fragile. Recreational drugs, taking those away, going on a cleanse, whether or not you struggle with an addiction. Anything that I can take away, access to anything that might be to my detriment. Anything that I can clear brush that no longer serves me and nurture the ground around me so that I can flourish. So when I got out of rehab, they gave us a phrase. It was called do the 5, stay alive. Now, I'm not going to do a talk about rehab, but I am going to use that headline, but I came up with my own steps. The first one is whatever you can do to water your grass. You decide for yourself what that means, but water your own grass. Secondly, as you could expect, clear away your brush. You are responsible for taking the things out of your life that could be combustible. The third I took on at the beginning of this year, and it has been phenomenal for me, and that is to consume intentionally. At the beginning of 2025, I said, I am responsible for what goes in my mouth, what goes in my eyes, and what goes in my ears. So I'm standing here less of a man than I was at Discovery in March because I've lost 35 pounds. Those of you who've seen Joshua, our 7-year-old, that's how much weight I lost. When I put him on my shoulders, I'm like, whoa, I was carrying that around. But it's also being intentional about what I read and what I listen to. News doesn't find me in my feed. I choose to go to it because I consume intentionally. Fourth, don't pull out your phones right now, but I want you to think about the keyboard of your phone because you have in your hands a tool for your own flourishing and your own recovery. If you just know up the left side of the phone, 741-741. That will connect you. If you type home as a text to 741-741, that will connect you with a crisis counselor from the crisis text line. I've volunteered with them since 2021, and I've spent 600 hours on text messaging with people in crisis, not necessarily suicidal, but what they consider a crisis, the crisis counselor on the other end of the text line will consider a crisis. And you have access to that, all of you, with a phone. And finally, build your own dream team. Put together, assemble who you need in your life that will allow you to have the life that you want. In my early years of recovery, it was my sponsor, it was my spiritual director, it was my CPA who helped me get my finances back in order. It was my sister who helped me know that I could get my bills paid on time. And it was my therapist and my physician. They didn't know each other, but they were all committed to my life, just like that team of people was the night of June 11th. So build your own dream team. My sister said it best, that on June 11th, 2003, it was not the end of the book. It was just the end of the chapter. And the life that I lead now is unrecognizable to that guy who was at the edge of the bridge. I accepted a faculty appointment at NYU and then Stanford and then Columbia and now USC. I was able to publish my first book. I did a TED Talk and a TEDx talk. And I helped co-create the event that we have all benefited from this afternoon. And probably the biggest achievement that I couldn't see is in the rooms of recovery. I met my life partner and my husband and my spouse and my best friend, Ken. And together we have adopted Joshua, Roma, and Tobias. None of that looked possible to me then. And yet I know now, standing before you, that I am leading a life beyond my wildest dreams. And the best is yet to come. Because 24 hours at a time, I keep walking down that bridge back to life from the edge of death to the center of life.